Hey, today I wanted to speak briefly about car maintenance tips and how to get your vehicle to last the longest and to run the best. And I'm going to refer to my 2000 Chevy Impala and um, and tell you what I've done. I've got well over 200,000 miles on the car now, and it's quite remarkable because I bought the car at 19,000 miles as a pre-owned vehicle. It was a rental back in 2001. And since that time, I haven't blown a single light bulb in this vehicle. And I find that remarkable. It's 13 years now, a car that's 14 years old, and with over 200,000 miles on it. And the only bulbs that I've ever blown were the license plate. When I finally thought to check the license plate lights, they were both blown. It's got two little bulbs under there, the specialty bulbs for that purpose. But the lights are on all the time. I don't touch the headlights. I leave them in the off position, and they're on during the day for safety, I guess. And I haven't blown a tail light, a brake light, not a courtesy light, nothing else like that in this car. And another thing I find quite remarkable is that it's got the original fuel pump and the original alternator. In the past, those things would go out on a much more regular basis. Now there's another thing though that is a little discouraging, and that's the fuel gauge. About when the car was about 3-4 years old, the fuel gauge started malfunctioning, and it still hasn't worked right to this day. And it's kind of expensive just to get it diagnosed, but I imagine it's probably the sending unit. But getting to it is very difficult, so it's labor intensive, and it works good enough to where I've just not dealt with it. But I've got a 37-year-old GMC van, and the fuel gauge to this day works fine. So I don't see how that's progress and innovation to have a fuel gauge malfunction at 4 years as opposed to one still working fine after 37 years. I don't know what's going on there. Maybe that's a bit of this planned obsolescence, But anyhow, I'm going to run down a little bit about my vehicle and what I've done to take care of it. Now, I suggest if anybody out there goes to buy a pre-owned vehicle, used vehicle from somebody, don't worry so much about how many miles are on it, but ask to see the maintenance record. And you want to see every single oil change in the history of that vehicle written down. Like I've got it right here. I use these index cards like this. You see that? It's got all the maintenance on this. I also keep another maintenance record in my repair book. But every single oil change, I mark the date and I mark the mileage. And this goes back to when I first purchased the car. And here's some more of those records right here. And every one of them. I would ask to see every one of the maintenance records. And before this, I was writing them right into the book. You can see right here for notes. But I quickly ran out of space. But it goes back all the way to when the vehicle was new. And here's another point. You see up here I marked the kind of oil I was using. I started using 1030 Kendall from the start, and I'm still using it to this day, and that's another recommendation I've heard from mechanics. But I know I've got well over 50 oil changes listed here in this time. And like I said, I recommend you check all the maintenance records. And here's another tip on your automatic transmission fluid. Your owner's manual is going to tell you to change it at every 50,000 under high stress city driving and 100,000 under highway driving. But I've talked to mechanics that say in their own vehicles they'll change it at every 25,000, and that's what I would recommend. You change your automatic transmission fluid every 25,000 miles, and you might just decide to change the filter every other automatic transmission fluid refill. In here is the engine room. I like to keep it clean as much as possible. There's a really good product out there called Purple Power, and you can spray it on and then take some fresh water and spray it off. You might need to scrub some areas, but I'll show you the body. It's pretty clean for 14 years old. Pretty straight body. Okay, in this canister is your air filter, and I think your manual is going to recommend changing it about every 20,000 miles. But I found that you can get pretty much twice that if you take it out and clean it, pat it lightly on some firm surface, blow it out with fresh air. It's pretty easy to take off. There's a couple clips on this one. Usually they're pretty easy. And the brake fluid, though I haven't changed the brake fluid, is probably a good idea, and I probably ought to do it here pretty soon. I had the spark plugs changed at 100,000 miles. The reason I had somebody else do it was because it's a real pain in the behind. Because this is a V6 motor, you got three of these spark plugs are easy to get to in the front here, but there's three are really hard to get to in the back. Now I probably didn't need to do that because spark plugs rarely go out or get dirty anymore. So if you use a good fuel injector cleaner with it also acts as a combustion chamber cleaner, and that'll help keep your spark plugs clean and everything else. The coolant, you know, you change that every I don't know, 5 years, something like that. There's cheap coolant testing units you can get, and just make sure, you know, you don't have to change it if it doesn't need to be changed. Let's see what else now. Not a lot to talk about here, but I did want to tell you that, you know, it's not hard to get a lot of miles out of your vehicle. And this particular engine, I was talking to some fellows, they said that this car is a little noisy at startup when it's cold because they intentionally built in a piston slap, which reduces wear on a cold startup. So I think that's pretty cool. And I imagine if this engine's built to get over 400,000 miles, I could probably get 500,000 or more out of it. And, you know, just being very regular about oil changes and stuff like that. So really, it's not hard to take care of your vehicle. All those things I've just mentioned, that's pretty much it. There is some deeper maintenance and, you know, things like cleaning your EGR valve once in a while and changing out your thermostat. But I just did those recently at right about 200,000 miles. The thermostat was stuck open, and it's important to have that thing functioning right because it'll affect your fuel economy. And the EGR valve, you know, it was a little bit dirty after 200,000 miles, but it wasn't bad. And another nice thing about this vehicle, it's got this serpentine belt system in here, and it's got a tensioner that you never have to adjust. I've never adjusted the belt. I've never messed with it. It controls everything, and it's just a great design. Kudos to the engineers on this deal. There's another thing, the power steering fluid, that could be changed too every once in a while, though I haven't done it yet. And you know, the brake fluid and the power steering fluid are something I think I ought to take care of here pretty quick. I've done brakes on this car a couple of times since I've had it. One last nice thing about this car is it, unlike so many vehicles today that have these timing belts, this car has a timing chain. So it never requires maintenance. And I did have the water pump changed, but not because it needed it, but because the mechanic, I had him do another job, which was a lower intake manifold gasket was bad. And purportedly, these were a defective gasket in these vehicles, and it's very hard to get to. And I just had him change out the water pump at the same time under his advice because if you had to do the job separately, they're so labor intensive, it would have been very costly to do them separately should the water pump end up going out. But anyhow, that's about all I had to say about my 2000 Chevy Impala, and you know, advice on how to keep your vehicle running great for indefinitely, you know, maybe 1,000,000 miles. I wouldn't be that surprised. And also advice on what to look for when you're buying a used vehicle. Make sure you see the maintenance records, and it's probably a good idea to take it to a friend that knows something about engines, that can tell you right away if, you know, there's something wrong. You could probably test drive it and tell you pretty quickly. You might not even pay him if it's a friend, but you know, if you don't know much about vehicles, have it checked, and definitely insist that they provide you the maintenance records. Alrighty out there. Happy motoring.